Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're climbing to 2200 rapid elo, while I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. And today we face a caro-kann, which is what I play as the black pieces, and hopefully I'll be able to show you what I play against the caro, which is taking on d5 and going c4, which is known as the Panov attack. And I've got many videos in the Panov because so many people play the Caro, which is a great opening. But the Panov takes the caro-kann out of traditional theory. Well, maybe not traditional theory, but traditional ideas in the Caro, because normally in the caro-kann, the whole idea is to basically build this light square triangle sort of structure and really try to dominate the light squares in the center. But what the Panov attack does is it throws both the E and C pawns at the D pawn immediately. Meaning if we were to take now, for example, and my opponent takes back, then black doesn't really have that light squared stronghold. He doesn't have that pawn chain. The D pawn would be isolated. And if black takes us, then he loses control of the central light squares, namely e4 and c4, which are very important to the black position. It stops us maneuvering our knight into e4, for example. So it really does make the game difficult for black. And it's not winning. It's not like immediately winning or anything. I mean, no opening is. But it makes life strange, and it changes the tone of the game. My opponent goes bishop b4, which I would say is one of the more challenging lines, so I do rate that from black. I'm going to respond with bishop g5. The idea of bishop b4 is obviously to pin the knight and relieve some pressure, so I'm just going to do the same. I'm going to pin his knight and make it so that he can't defend his center quite as well as he might like to, therefore counteracting his bishop. I think here we basically just want to go like bishop d3 and castle. We could go a3 and encourage my opponent to take, but I see no need to actually encourage that. We could play a move like queen b3, applying pressure, but just knight c6 looks good, and maybe take would cause some issues on the d4 square for us. So I think I prefer to go bishop d3. The Panov is a very aggressive opening in many situations as well. For example, if we play a move like c5 at the correct moment, we can lock up the center. And if we can reduce the effectiveness of b6 or e5, breaking in the center, then we can get some really nice attacking ideas going. Queen a5, that seems a bit off. That seems a bit off to me. So what's the idea of queen a5? Well, it's obviously to apply pressure to the knight. It's also unpinning this knight to allow it to jump into the e4 square, right? Now, I'm not sure whether it works. Now, the first thing we should be looking at is bishop takes f6, of course, because if my opponent takes back and we go something like bishop c2, I mean, the black structure is ruined and his king looks pretty weak. However, if we take like this, and my opponent takes on c3, and we take back, and my opponent goes queen takes c3 with check, of course, also hitting my rook, then how do I defend against that? If I play a move like king... Well, firstly, if I go knight d2, which is the move you want to play, then the bishop hangs. Do we want to do that? I'm not sure. I don't think so. So I'm also looking at the move queen to c2, which not only defends the knight, but also adds pressure to h7 and puts more pressure on the e4 square. We also have to be aware that if this pawn ever takes on c4 or e4, the bishop is going to be under attack. So we have to be very aware of that. So something like queen c2, for example, I don't know, maybe something like knight e4, bishop e4, de4, our knight's under attack and our bishop's under attack. Knight e5 and pawn f6 could be an issue, forking our pieces. So it's very interesting. Another thing we can consider, though, is just castling and sacrificing the pawn. So So if we castle, and my opponent goes bishop c3, bc3, queen c3, let's say bishop f6, gf6, cd5, and ed5, that looks very interesting because my opponent's pawns are completely split up. And yeah, we're down a pawn, but I'm not sure I care that much. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to castle and offer my opponent a pawn. I think that's the logical thing to do. He could still go for knight to e4. I don't think it's effective anymore, though, because, I mean, just knight takes e4, and after take, yes, he opens up the attack on the bishop, but it's defended by the knight, so it doesn't really do anything, and we're just up a pawn. So I've never seen this type of line before. I've never actually seen the queen come out to a5 quite like this, so I have a feeling it's slightly wrong. Okay, he changes the move order. Very interesting. So he's, of course, attacking the bishop and attacking c3. If we take the knight and takes, our knight's under attack, bishop's under attack, pawn's under attack. If knight e5, then pawn f6. Sorry, take, knight e5, pawn f6. I'm not sure we have a counter shot. Don't think so. Our bishop is currently defended, so we could take, maybe? Not sure if that's good. We could also retreat our bishop back to d2, just defending c3 and getting it out of danger. And if my opponent takes on c3, then queen e1 looks winning because the knight is just pinned. And if bishop d2, knight d2, queen d2, I think we just have a better position. c3 is defended. We have good central control. We have a very nice bishop. His bishop sucks because of e6 blocking in the bishop. So I think bishop d2 makes a lot of sense. We could consider bishop to e7, hitting the rook, and after rook e8 only move, we could go bishop to b4, hitting the queen and defending c3, which is very interesting. And let's say queen c7? Looks reasonable. Maybe then we can go take and knight to e5. That looks very interesting. c4 is weak. If pawn f6... maybe pawn f6 is an issue. Because the knight looks like it's trapped. Although we could put the knight on d2. So like bishop e7, rook e8, bishop b4. Or maybe, sorry, we take the knight first. Take. Oh no, that doesn't work. If here and here, here. Or maybe queen c2. That doesn't pin it. No, I think that should be fine. Sorry, this is complicated. The panov is complicated by nature. Bishop e7, rook e8, bishop b4. I'm not sure where else the queen goes. If the queen goes to b6, I don't think that's all that impressive. It doesn't seem to be doing anything useful. After take, let's say it goes to c7. I think that's more useful, hitting c4. Take, knight d2. Let's say pawn f5, defending. It's interesting. It is interesting, but I'm not convinced. I think bishop d2 makes more sense, personally, because I think that if my opponent takes, which seems to be the logical move to get rid of my bishop pair, then he's just traded off his best piece. And he can't take on c3 because of the pin with queen to e1. There's no way to support the knight. You can try some fancy tactics, but the problem is taking on c3 always comes with tempo on the queen, so it doesn't work. We also have good attacking opportunities. Moves like knight g5 look quite interesting, potentially forcing a knight trade of some form. It could be quite nice. Something like take, and if queen c3, maybe we can gambit that. Maybe it's not necessary. We always have the option to take on d5, but currently, of course, black can't take us because his knight would hang. So I think we've navigated the opening quite well. I hope all of my decisions have made sense. But it has been admittedly very complicated, so we will check after the game using the engine to see some of the other lines, and I'll actually play out some of the other lines so you can see what I'm calculating, and also just see if we've gone wrong anywhere. But I think this looks very comfortable, and just a very interesting position. Pawn f5, another. I think that's a good move. I would say that's a good move. Just supporting the knight, because if take, that looks very dubious for us. Knight g5, I don't think does anything. So knight to e5 looks interesting, preparing a move like f3 to get rid of his knight. We could also consider a move like pawn c5 to lock the center shut, but we don't really have any good attacking opportunities currently, so that feels unnecessary. Knight e5 prepares pawn f3. If knight e5, knight c6. Do we want to trade with like take? Not sure about that. Knight e5, knight c6 with pawn f4, copying my opponent. Then we can't go pawn f3 to kick his knight away. So I'm not sure about that. Queen b3 is interesting. The bishop is defended by my knight, which, you know, means it's fine. Applying pressure to d5. It is defended by the queen, I suppose, but something like queen here, take, and c4 with tempo on the queen. Maybe, well, taking first and then c4 could be interesting. And queen b3 also puts pressure on b7, which is interesting. I think that's a nice move. I'm not concerned about this. Also, it just adds defense to the c3 pawn, which is useful. I think queen b3 makes sense. We're also defending a2, which frees up this rook to move if we want, because it could be useful on the b file. If black goes for a move like b6, preparing bishop b7. That's... I don't think that works because of knight e5. Because now knight c6 can't be played because the knight would hang. And if bishop b7... Oh, sorry, no, our bishop would hang in that line. Maybe not then. But if pawn b6, maybe we can just play take, and something like c4 with tempo on the queen, followed by knight to e5. I think that we're better equipped to be opening up the center, considering we have 4 developed pieces, black has 2. We also have this open line against the black king, which could open up at any point, and the queen is awkwardly placed, so I think that is a decent looking idea. Alright, well, our opponent abandoned the game, but we will jump into an analysis, and we'll also do a second game, so don't go anywhere. Let's jump into the analysis, and then we'll play another game. Okay, so 87.6% accuracy for us, 80.3% for my opponent. Looks like quite a good opening. So this is a Panov with move pawn c4. Taking isn't that great for black because it basically just gives the center to us after bishop c4. Yes, the d4 pawn is isolated, but we can play around it very, very nicely. So knight f6 is the main move. Knight c3, pawn e6 is fine. Personally, I play knight c6 here with the black pieces. But pawn e6, knight f3, just developing. And bishop b4, I think, is quite a nice move to create some difficult decisions for white. I chose bishop g5, which is not the best move, but I like it because I think it makes the game a bit more tactical in nature. And after castles, bishop d3, queen a5 did feel wrong. And here, I think I made the correct decision by castling. I was considering bishop f6, and I had calculated bishop c3, bc3, queen c3, king f1. I thought this line looked quite nice. The engine does think it's better for us. It prefers rook c1, which makes sense. But it also thinks that black should go for, after queen c3, king f1, should go for dc4, hitting the bishop. And if we try a desperado, then king g7, bishop e2, and black is fine because our rook kind of sucks. But I castled, which is the best move. Bishop c3 is a mistake, but then taking back is a mistake. I could take on f6, which I admittedly didn't really consider. If my opponent takes here... Oh, we just... Yeah, we Greek gift. No, we don't Greek gift. Queen d3. Oh, right. If g6, then this. And if the king retreats, knight g5. And if g6, we just mate anyway. Okay. Well, bc3. Knight e4 is a mistake. dc4 is better. And after this, knight bd7. But this is, of course, still very passive for black. I would not want to play this with the black pieces at all. This looks really, really... a really sad position. But knight e4, trying to be active. Bishop d2 is wrong. Engine does like my other idea of queen c2. Why did I reject this move? Why did I reject this move? I thought that maybe he could take. No, not with the queen. Oh, because if you take with the queen, then I take here. And then if take, then take. And if you take with the knight, then just bishop d2. And yeah, that makes sense. I think I thought maybe that he could go for a move like knight c6 or something along these lines. And here the engine wants bishop f4. I was also trying to calculate bishop e7, which the engine doesn't mind going for this bishop b4 line. And after queen c7, I had calculated take knight d2. And I didn't think this was good enough after f5. The engine thinks it's slightly better for black. But it instead offers the move rook e1, which I just didn't consider. And if knight c6, rook c1, which, sure, I suppose if take, then we have a lot of open lines against the black pieces. But bishop d2 is what I chose. Here, black should take, but I thought we had very good play here. Like something like knight c6, for example, cd5, ed5, rook e1. I thought we were crushing because we just have so much more activity than black. But the engine thinks after dc4, bishop c4, knight d7, bishop b3, knight f6, knight e5, and bishop d7 that black is okay. I still think this is far easier to play with the white pieces, though. We have way more space. And this hanging pawn structure, I think, is quite nice. The open b file is useful. My opponent goes f5. Queen b3 is a good move. And here, of course, my opponent abandons the game. But I thought this was super difficult for black to play. After something like knight c6, for example, like cd5, ed5, I was trying to make c4 moves work. They don't work yet because the knight just hangs. Sorry, the bishop hangs. Engine suggests something like rook fe1. I thought in some lines we might be able to like take and go pawn c4. Not necessarily right now, but in some lines it might work. And something like, I don't know, queen b6 and knight e5 ideas looked interesting. But we have a lot of pressure here. After a move like b6, which I was considering for black, the engine suggests take. And if the pawn takes, bishop e1 is completely winning, apparently. That's really interesting. Why is this so bad? Bishop b5. And if knight c6, c4. Oh, right. I get it. The queen is trapped. That's awesome. Anyway, my opponent abandons the game, so we're going to search for another game because that would be a sorry place to leave the video. But getting very close to 2200. Probably only, well, if we win the next two games, we're probably there. So here we have a Sicilian. All right, we're going to go a3, the Mangarini variation, which I initially learned from a Gotham chess course quite a long time ago. And yeah, I absolutely love this opening. I have, I believe, a positive record with it in classical over-the-board games. In fact, I'm sure I have a positive record with it. And I have had this position over the board before as well, where after pawn to b4, we are sacrificing the A and B pawns for the C pawn. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, the idea is to go c3 with tempo on the bishop, and then go d4. and basically say to black, okay, you're up a pawn, but we have a lot of space in the center. We have the open a file for the rook. You've lost your c pawn, and you've also put your bishop back on f8, which is actually one of the better moves in the position, believe it or not, because the issue for black is this g7 pawn. But after pawn d5, pawn e5, it's so hard for black to develop. I mean, look how cramped the black position is. This bishop struggles to get out. This bishop can't really get out. It's like classic French bishop. How is black going to castle? That's another good question. And after bishop d3, we have clear attacking lines towards the black king if it decides to castle kingside, which most of the time it does. Although a lot of the time the black king just sits in the center of the board because there's nowhere safe for it. I mean, castling queenside clearly isn't safe, considering my open A and B files. So okay, knight c6. I think knight e2 is the move here, because one of the things that we really want to do is push f4, f5 in the future. So we're going to castle kingside and either put the knight on g3 and go for this pawn break to crack open the black king, or castle kingside and put the knight on f4 in certain lines to maybe try and go after the dark squares in the black camp. Okay, knight to f5, interesting. I think we can castle. Of course we can take this, but after g6, the black position is relatively okay. We do have the knight coming to f4, which could be useful. Pawn g6, okay. I think knight a3 is strong here. The reason is because if bishop to g7, then knight to b5 is very difficult for black to deal with. Reason being, we are simply threatening to take the knight and then play knight to d6 check. And the funny thing is that a6 doesn't stop knight b5, because if take, then the rook hangs, which is a very common idea in these lines. I'm not sure I want to go for this just yet, because the bishop is still controlling d6. So if we like take and knight here, the bishop can take, and after pawn takes, queen takes, we're just down 2 pawns for no real reason. So I'm not going to do it yet, but it's a possibility. How else can we apply pressure here? c4 is interesting in some lines. Here I'm not so sure it's any good. Rook b1 makes no sense, because then we can't go knight to b5. I don't think we want to take this knight just yet. No, I don't think that makes sense. Knight to f4 is interesting, because maybe we want to play take and knight to h5. Yeah, I like knight f4. That's really interesting. That's really interesting, because if we take and the g-pawn takes, we get access to h5, and because my opponent's moved his g-pawn, he is losing control of f6, and we also control g7 to stop the fianchetto. So this black bishop is basically overloaded, because we are also threatening to do this. So the dark squares are just up for grabs, because black has put all of his pawns on light squares, and this knight is currently controlling a lot of important dark squares, right? And if we take and my opponent takes back with the e-pawn, then his d-pawn is incredibly weak. And after a move like queen to f3, it's unclear how he defends. If he tries knight e7, then knight to b5 is killer, because the bishop is disconnected from d6, and you still can't take because the rook hangs. And if you try a move like bishop to e6, then we have potential threats of taking the bishop and ruining the black structure, like this, essentially. So, okay, rook b8, a reasonable move to stop knight to b5, which makes sense. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. How do we turn the pressure gauge up? Because we are down a pawn, and if black gets time to consolidate with like bishop g7 and castles, we're just going to be down a pawn, which is playable, but would rather not be. I think knight c2 is reasonable in these lines. This is often how you develop this knight if it doesn't go to b5, which looks odd, But it's actually quite good because it can come to a square like e3 to challenge this knight, or hop into b4 to go at g4 to go after the f6 square. But what knight c2 also does is frees up the a3 square. So if bishop g7, we can go bishop a3, and well, now black can't castle, so that's very nice. So I think knight c2 makes the most sense. Just also add support for the d4 pawn. Maybe we want to push pawn c4. Maybe. This opening is all about pressure, really. There are some very tactical traps and lines in the Mangarini Sicilian, but when your opponent gets themselves into a position where they're not going to just lose to some tactical trick, which my opponent is doing a great job of because he's a good player, he's over 2200, then it does become a very pressure-driven opening. We're trying not to make threats every move necessarily, but to threaten a build-up of pressure all the time. So knight c2, it looks like it doesn't really do anything, but the idea is to free up the a3 square to prevent the bishop from moving, to prevent black from castling, to keep his king in the center for future threats, if that makes sense. So okay, pawn b5. Black prepares to develop the light squared bishop, potentially. Makes sense. I like the look of the move queen f3. Just developing the queen, also applying pressure to d5 to prepare to take the knight. And if something like g takes, then we can go knight to h5 and have all of that fun. And if he takes with the e-pawn, then this just hangs. We could also consider taking immediately. And if take, then knight h5. And if he takes with the e-pawn, queen f3. If knight e7, maybe we can go knight to b4 or bishop a3. And if bishop e6, I think bishop e6. Oh, that just hangs a6. Oh, I think we can just take. Yeah, I think we can take. I don't think black has enough defense for his light squares, to be honest. And yeah, this is a tough decision for black. It looks strange to be trading off our bishop voluntarily like this, but we are inducing a weakness of some form in the black camp. We're going to break up his pawn structure in some manner, and we're also getting rid of black's most active piece. Black only actually has one developed piece now, the knight on c6, and it's not a very impressive knight because it literally can't really do anything. It can only go to a5, and I mean, it can try and infiltrate, but it's going to be pretty easy to quash that idea. My opponent takes with the e-pawn, which I think is the better option, not to give us access to h5, because that looks completely game over. But yeah, queen f3 looks interesting. Knight to e3 looks interesting. If knight e3, bishop here, we just take. Knight e3, knight to e7. Queen b3. I've got to say, everything looks good. Everything looks good. Let's go knight e3. Get the knights working together. I feel like it makes more sense to get the knight to do this job because the queen is of higher value. So it makes more sense to lead the charge with the lower value piece, i.e. the knight. And if we win back our pawn now, we're going to be completely winning. For example, if my opponent goes bishop g7, and if we take here and my opponent castles, he's out of the woods for now, but d5 is going to come with serious consequences. Realistically, though, if bishop g7, I don't think I'm going to take. I think I would go bishop a3 and just stop black from castling. That would be the move I choose. But okay, knight to e7 as expected. Here we can develop the queen to b3 or f3 to target the d5 pawn. Let me think. Does it matter? I feel like the queen does more on b3. It also defends c3, which can't be bad. Also on f3, if the bishop comes to b7, maybe there's issues. If bishop b7, we can also consider the move pawn e6, trying to cause chaos in the black camp. which looks interesting, but maybe unnecessary. I really like the look of bishop a3. Threatening the knight, but more so actually threatening to come to d6 and disconnect the queen and hit the rook. Also just gets our last piece into the game. If bishop a3, bishop h6, counter-attacking our knight, I think we can take. After queen takes and knight takes, because the queen is under attack, you have to take. Queen's under attack, f6 is threatened. If take, the same threats remain. That looks completely winning. So, you know, we are 17 moves into the game. We are still down a pawn. We have not won our pawn back. But we have applied continuous pressure. We have added pressure with every single move. And the black king is still stuck. So, rook c8, good move. Making sure bishop d6 doesn't come with tempo on the rook. I still think we can play bishop d6, though. We could take, but I think that only helps black. I think that helps relieve pressure. I think bishop d6 is the best move. Even if it doesn't come with tempo. Because there's no way for black to add support to the d5 pawn. You can't support it any further. And we are just threatening to... Are we threatening to take? Are we? Yeah, I think we are. I think we are. Maybe we'd have to start with rook e1, though. Maybe that would be the key move. Because all I'm thinking is... I mean, okay, what does black even play? What does black play here, actually? Because if bishop g7, then... I think I take the knight? Oh, no, I don't. I just take on d5. I have to take. If rook c3, rook a6. We're still down a pawn. No, we're not. We're equal material. And black can't castle. And if the bishop comes back, queen b5 check. Game over. The rook's coming to a8. The black king is surrounded. So the black bishop can't move. The dark square bishop. If the light square bishop moves, a6 hangs. This rook has no useful squares. If the queen moves, nothing changes. I don't think. Maybe the queen can try and defend d5, I guess. The queen comes to b6, trying to defend a6. That looks interesting. Take. The only thing I'm thinking is I want rook e1 check because I don't want black to castle. So what I'm thinking is if I move like queen b6, I want to go rook e1 because I want this capture to come with a check on the black king so that the black king can't castle. That's all I'm thinking. Because even if we win this d5 pawn, we're only equaling the material out. And if c3 falls in the process, for example, well, then we're still down a pawn. And the black king becomes safe. So I don't want to allow that. We have to be careful with how we execute this attack. And we need to be precise here. Because if the black king wriggles out, we may well be equal or worse, which I don't think we want either of those things. I think we want to be winning, obviously. So bishop d6 is a cool move. Let's say black goes for a move like knight c6. Well, we just take and take. Easy. We win back our pawn. f6 is compromised. Game over. My opponent does go queen b6, which I think is the best move. Or at least it looks like the best try. Again, if we play take and take and... I don't love it. I don't love it. Bishop c5 makes no sense. I think rook e1 makes the most sense. If queen c6... trying to defend and attack. Rook e1, queen c6, take. take. That's no good. Here, 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 here. I think that's good, because if black tries to... I mean, he can't castle because his bishop hangs, and if we go knight f6 check and he takes, we can take with check. Well, if we take with this knight. So I think rook e1. I think rook e1. I'm using the f rook because I want the a rook either targeting a6, or I want it to have the ability to come to c1 if it needs to do a job on the c file. But we're trying to involve all of our pieces. We have 5 of our 6... No, we have all 6 pieces playing, actually. All 6 are participating in this attack. And black is playing, I would say, without his rooks. His rooks aren't really doing anything. This rook is trying to counterattack, but the c-file is kind of a sideshow right now. It's not very important. The action is happening in this area of the board, and the rooks can't really contribute. The rook can't even come to c6. It would block its own bishop off. So that's no good. We also can consider e6 still in some lines. I mean, for now, that would hang our bishop. But e6 is still an idea. Don't forget about it. Because if we want to blast open the position, it could be useful. For now, I don't think it's good, because there's always the option of f6 for black. For now, keeping the position shut. But it might not work if, for example, we have a knight on d5 putting pressure on f6, right? Then maybe you can't do that. And maybe our rook is supporting the e6 push. So I think rook e1 is a nice move. Like bishop d6, it's a preparatory move. We're trying to cover all possible outcomes, essentially, if that makes sense. Because I don't want to give black a free ticket out of this. I don't want to allow that. Like, for example, if I, in this position, do the natural thing and play take, take, and take, I'm just not convinced. I'm really not convinced. After a move like, I don't know, queen e6? Maybe? Maybe queen e6? Pinning the knight to my queen? Like, am I even better? Am I just lost? The bishops are actually really powerful. If I take the knight on e7, I am giving black the bishop pair. That's important to note. So I want to make sure I have access to this f6 square with check. That's the key ingredient to this attack. And to make that work, I need this capture to come with discovered attacks. That's the idea. So I hope that makes sense. And also, you know, if the king goes to f8, maybe we have forks on d7, right? That's another idea. But yeah, black is ticking lower on the clock, trying to figure out this position. This will be a fascinating one to check with the engine. Both of these games have been really, really interesting. Obviously, the first game ended sooner than we would have liked due to abandonment. I don't know whether that was just internet going or frustration with the position. I don't know. Bishop c6. That is not a move I even considered. What does that do? I have literally no idea. Literally no idea. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's figure this out. So I think that's a waiting move, to be honest with you. We could try to further improve our position, but I think our position's pretty perfect, to be honest. Bishop c5 looks interesting. Because the queen goes to c7, we win a6, and we win the game, probably. If the queen comes to b7, keeping an eye on a6. Oh, maybe that's the idea. Queen b7 to add more defense and keep an eye on a6. Maybe that's the idea. Ah, okay. I think that's what it is. All right, all right, all right. So we could take. And after bishop takes and knight takes, tempo on the queen. Maybe his idea is queen to b7. But then take. And d5 is coming, and that looks really bad. If taken castles, then the bishop hangs. If I move like rook d8, we can take the bishop and force his king out and go pawn d5. I think this is winning. I think we should take. I think we have way too much pressure. The a file, the e file, the d5 pawn, even e6. Wait, can he go knight d5, bishop d5, knight d5? So take, and queen e6. Is that an option? Blocking everything up and defending the bishop. That's interesting. I'm not sure it works. Maybe we have queen a2. Attacking a6. And defending the queen. Very interesting idea. If taking queen takes, then black just castles. e6 is interesting, but f6 seems to hold it together. Ish. That's... I assume that's the idea. I still think we should go for this, though. This still looks winning. Because black still can't castle. I don't think. I don't think he can. Okay, take and take. I think queen e6 is the idea. And we don't have tactics because the queen is defended, right? That's the main point. Okay. If queen e6, what else can we do? We could go knight f6 check. Oh, yeah, we can, because if bishop takes, pawn takes, the queen's pinned. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Queen e6, knight f6. If king moves, yeah, that's great. Okay. Queen c6, attacking c3. Makes sense. We could take the bishop, force the king out. d5, queen c3, d6 check, king f8. Not sure. Not sure. I guess he can just take that. Probably. If knight f6, take, king here. Rook e7 wins the game. There's no defense. Unless you go queen c4. Which is actually very interesting. Queen a3, queen c3. We go take and rook takes. We can't go rook a6. Oh no, we can go rook a6. Or can we? Take threatens mate. We don't have a mate because the king has g7. My opponent's putting up some stubborn defense. Really stubborn. Which is just what you get at this level. Maybe I can go e6, because if pawn takes, I can go rook takes. And if queen takes, I have knight c7 check, winning the queen. And if pawn e6, pawn f6, take. Pawn here, queen here. Take. That has to be winning. Rook d8. Check. Here. I don't know. e6 is very interesting. I don't think we can take on a6. I don't think that works at all. Again, if knight f6, take king f8. I don't have to go rook e7. It's not required. Oh, we know we do have mate. Oh, I'm bugging. The king doesn't have g7. So take. Sorry, queen c4. Queen c4, rook c4, rook a6. We are threatening mate. Okay, so if here and here... What's my follow-up? I don't know. I think e6 is the move I want to go for. I like it. I like it. And f6, I'm just not convinced it holds. Our knight is currently defending c3 as well, so we don't have to worry about that for the time being. c3 is not hanging. If castles, the bishop hangs. If pawn f6, black still can't castle because the bishop hangs. I don't know if I'm letting up the pressure by playing this. Pawn f6. If the bishop moves, then f6 hangs. Maybe it's just like pawn f6 and rook e3. Maybe it's that simple, just defending. And the bishop can't move because the pawn hangs. The king can't move because the bishop hangs. If rook d8, then... I don't know. Maybe not knight f4, but something. Knight b4 is interesting. Pawn c4 makes no sense. Oh, rook a6 is interesting in some lines, because if queen takes, the knight c7 forks. But the queen could take on d5 in that particular line. I think. Check, bishop d8. Yeah, I think so. So maybe if f6, we don't go rook e3. Maybe there's another way. If take. d5, do we have to sack the pawn? Check. Take. Check. Oh, no, that's the line. That's the line. Yeah. The black king is completely stranded. And if the black king retreats, then d7 is going to be killer. Yeah, that's the line. My opponent's done a great job of defending this. Really, really has. This has been tough. But I think we've done enough. I think we're doing enough because we just have so much pressure. I'm not really sure what black can play to survive this. Again, I don't think f6 works because of take and d5. I mean, we just have connected pass pawns, and we have this d6 move with rook a6 and queen b5 being very scary. If I can keep queens on the board there, no way black defends. Okay, takes, but I thought I could go rook e6. That was my idea. And if queen takes, then knight c7 check, and the queen is just hanging. That was my point. We're also threatening this, we're threatening this, it's just game over. There's nothing that can be done. e6 was a clearance sacrifice. Well, not even a sacrifice, actually. It's just trying to clear up some squares for my pieces, tactically. And the problem is, if queen takes, knight c7, the black king can't move to defend the queen because it's attacked twice. That's the problem. So you have to take the knight. There's no choice. And then the black king is stranded. I mean, in theory, black has rook and the bishop for the queen, but it's nowhere near enough. And yeah, okay, if we take this, we get mated, sure, but we're not going to fall for that. I almost actually just played this. Okay, if we take on a6, castle, check, rook f7, check, king g7, check, bishop f6. We don't really give him too much play. Maybe this is the move. Just rook e1. Just making a simple threat to win the bishop. Black can't castle because the queen is guarding that square. Not that castling would really help here. This looks strong. I think this is the easiest move. I know I can take on a6 and have some nice threats of queen a8 and that kind of thing, and queen b5, but if we keep our queen on e6, the black king can't move. He can't castle. The rook can't really move because the bishop will hang. And if black does nothing, then d6 will just win the bishop outright, and then we'll have, what, a queen for a rook, which will be game over, of course. Yeah, you can do that, but it still doesn't stop this move. If rook take, we take, and the bishop is pinned, so you can't take my queen. And by keeping the rook on e1, I'm ensuring I never get back ranked as well. I know I could have given the king some luft with a move like h3 or h4 or g3, whatever, but it's not really necessary. I want a clean, quick win, and my opponent resigns. So that was a really interesting game. I think we played that well. I think the whole bishop d6 rook e1 idea was really nice, but I want to see what the engine has to say. So let's jump into the analysis. Well, that was lovely. 92.4% accuracy. That's pretty damn good considering how complicated the game was. And 79.6 for my opponent. So, yeah, the opening with this e6 line and b4, the computer always says it's better for black. I mean, in theory it is, but black has to defend very accurately, which my opponent, despite being a great player and defending very well for a while, eventually faltered. So take, and bishop takes. c3. Bishop f8 is inaccurate. Bishop e7 is the best, but bishop f8 is fine. We have had previously on the series bishop a5 in a previous episode, and after queen g4 we went on to win that game. But bishop f8 basically is defending g7 preemptively to stop my queen g4 ideas. So d4, d5, e5, taking space. Knight e7, bishop d3 is the best move. And you can see, you know, already we are slightly better, despite being down a pawn. And that effectively means that because the pawn would, in theory, take away 1 point of advantage, we have basically plus 1.33's worth of compensation for the pawn, if that makes sense. We should be -1 because we're down a pawn and a pawn is worth 1. But we're plus 0.33. So we have a lot of compensation for the pawn. Knight to c6. Knight e2. Engine slightly prefers knight h3, but it serves the same purpose of trying to come to f4, really. Personally, I like knight e2 more because we also have the option of knight g3 for an eventual f5 push. But because my opponent put his knight there, that wasn't an option. Knight f5. We castle. We're already almost at like +1. Like, we're not far away. And black hasn't done anything wrong. We just have so much pressure. It's just a sequence of tiny inaccuracies from black. And we are much better. Considering how early the game is. Again, g6, inaccurate, according to the engine. Engine prefers bishop e7. But this is a tough move to play. Like, I don't know, knight f4, coming to h5. That looks terrifying. We have 4 pieces just aimed at the black king. That looks really scary. So, pawn g6. Engine wants me to take immediately. And after ef5, go knight f4 and apply pressure here. And if gf5, then I assume get the knight over to h5, which is almost winning. Already. I went knight a3, which is also the best move. I think they're both really good. a6. Here it made no sense to go knight b5 straight away. We're actually equal if I do that after bishop d7, threatening to take because now this is defended. And if we take, and if my opponent takes back, then apparently knight d6 is strong. Because I guess we just support it? I don't know. If castles, I guess bishop h6 is game over. Yeah. But knight f4 is still strong. Rook b8 is a mistake. Engine says the only move is, well, one of the only moves is knight g7. I mean, who is going to play knight g7? And even if my opponent finds this, this is miserable. Miserable. Like, here, knight e3, similar to the game. And then the engine wants rook a7. You know? Like, who is playing that? My opponent goes rook b8. Knight c2 is slightly inaccurate because it allows knight g7. Allows. The engine wants me to take immediately and go for a similar plan, but I go knight c2 first. Pawn b5 makes sense, is inaccurate. Now we take, and we have to take. So take, e takes, which I think was the best choice. Engine says g takes is okay, but I don't know about that. It wants to go for this, which looks ludicrous. This is what the engine recommends. After bishop g7, threatening knight to f6, which is a threat. If black does something like this, knight f6 forces this, literally the only move, and after ef6, how is black defending? The only way is to sack the rook. And I'm sorry, but if this is the best line, for black, I'll happily play that, you know? So ef5, knight e3, threatening the pawn. Knight e7, inaccurate. The engine wants a5, giving up the d5 pawn, going bishop g7, and if bishop a3, going b4. That's the idea. Now, that's why a5. But I mean, come on now. Knight e7, queen b3. Engine likes bishop a3 slightly more, but it's the same, really. Both are going to be played. Bishop b7, bishop a3. Rook c8. I thought it was a strong move. But let's say move like pawn h5. Firstly, that increases the power of e6, because if take, this could hang in some lines. But here I was going to go bishop d6, attacking the rook, and after the rook moves, the engine actually wants rook fe1. But also taking is interesting, although apparently bad, because of this, which makes sense. Anyway, queen b3, bishop b7, bishop a3, rook c8, bishop d6. Engine prefers knight d3. Trying to come here, which I can't explain. Rook a8. Now bishop d6. Knight c8. Knight c5. If take. If take, then I take. But d7 is also a threat, I guess, if bishop retreats. Rook a6. Sacking the rook and going queen b5 check. Wow. And if blocked, then take. Oh, and bishop d6. Here, black's only move is apparently knight c6. And after bishop takes f8, king takes f8, knight e takes d5, I'm better anyway. And the pawns are rolling. My opponent goes queen b6, which I thought was a natural move, actually. Rook fe1 is the best move. Very happy to find that. My initial thing was obviously I wanted to take on... Sorry, do this first and then take. But I thought this was wrong. Because after something like take and take and queen e6, I thought black could play on here. Engine thinks c4 is strong. And if rook takes... Oh, I get this fork. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Rook fe1, though. And after bishop to c6, take, take, take is the best line. And after take and queen c6, I was expecting queen e6 initially. And I was going to go knight f6 check. I've realized this was winning, because if take, take, the queen is pinned. And if the king moves, there is d5. And, I mean, this is just unstoppable. Let's say the queen moves. Knight d7, I win the queen. The queen has no other squares. So I just win the queen. The engine actually suggests queen d6. Going for this, which I mean is obviously game over. Queen c6, though. e6 is slightly inaccurate. Knight e7 is best. And after take, d5, if queen c3, d6 is the crucial move. And if the king moves, I win this. And if the king goes to f8... Oh, I didn't see that. That's what I missed. fe6, though, is wrong. The only move, apparently, is king f8. Stepping off of the e-file. And after ef7, the bishop's under attack. Bishop d6 forced. Knight f6. And this is still just game over. The best line is to go for this. And then after rook e6, you take queen a3 check. King moves, rook e7, and I just have so much pressure. But my opponent takes, which allows rook e6, which is the key idea. And after queen takes, knight c7, this is relatively easy. Obviously, I can't take because I get mated, but just make threats. d5 is a very simple move, and d6 is just unstoppable. So my opponent resigns. That was a very interesting couple of games. I hope you guys enjoyed, and there is one more game to go, if we win the next game, to reach 2200. So let me know what you would like to see after we complete the climb to 2200 rapid elo. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you made it all the way to the end, I don't know, put something down in the comments. I have no idea. I'm blabbing. Anyway, if you want to see another very interesting game in the A3 Sicilian, check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of this climb to 2200, check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.